Hello and welcome back to my series of podcasts about people with purpose. On today's episode, I'm joined by Penny Reid of Eximia, a Kent-based business consultancy. And with over 15 years experience, Penny has worked in many business services and especially in the education sector. And is also an expert in HR and also compliance. Penny's most focus is creating effective solutions and the business needs, especially in education, developing effective systems, solutions, so that they can concentrate on what's really important to them, which is very much aligned with her purpose in that every child has the right to education. In her words, it's working with honesty, integrity, and being responsive to the needs of others. So glad to have you on the show today, Penny. How are you feeling?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. And what a great introduction.
It makes me laugh, like when people hear about themselves when I introduce people, but it's all you. It's all you. So for anybody who doesn't know what you do and what Eximia stands for, just give us a little bit of background about how you got into it, what started you off, and just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so Eximia launched in September. It really came about because of the passion that I have in terms of education, but also just for me, I wanted to spread the work that I was doing in one school to other schools. There's 11,000 schools just in the UK. And for me, that was quite a startling figure when I first started exploring Eximia as a company. So 15 years I've been in education. The last eight of those years have been in senior leadership teams. So effectively having that strategic point of view, which is quite unusual to have someone from the kind of business area on an SLT actually. So I've been really, really fortunate that I've managed to see the whole picture, teaching and learning, business areas. I've been involved with the children. I've been involved in behaviour. So I've got that kind of whole spectrum. But I know that to have those effective systems and processes and really paying heed to that kind of business area of a school or the business areas.
Sure.
If you do that properly, then everything you should be doing should be feeding into that teaching and learning, which is effectively what's being delivered to those students.
Brilliant. It sounds, so have you always worked in education or have you done other work as well? You said you have a business background?
Yeah, so I've been really lucky. Lucky, I guess you kind of do make your own luck. I've made some really good decisions. So I've worked in private sector, I've worked in public sector, and then obviously moved into education. And my very first kind of foray into a school was really volunteering when my children were really young, just even sitting in a classroom doing reading, listening to the children read at primary level. And just to see them having those kind of light bulb moments over something that we take for granted, that, reading cat for the first time and seeing them work out it's cat, and to know that you've just been that little tiny bit involved in that learning. It was amazing. So from that, I then ended up just kind of moving into it on a part-time basis. And then just the passion grew, that want to really help shape the children of our future, because I'm really passionate about that. These people are effectively going to be the people that look after us, navigate their way through what we're leaving them at the moment, which is a really uncertain world. So I think more than ever, we should be really looking at our young people and really helping to give them the tools to explore their way forward in the future.
Excellent. So your passion or your purpose has been driven all the way through. It sounds going to sound really rubbish, but the end product, which is the children, which is their futures and everything else, and everything you do is around supporting that. But you don't educate; you're more to do with helping the business side of these, like schools and universities or whatever. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't educate in terms of delivering in a classroom,
Yeah.
but it is very much, for me, it's about having fair and consistent processes. And then if you have those, you attract the very best staff, you retain those staff, and you can help grow those staff. We know that we are living in a kind of environment where people are leaving education, unfortunately, in droves. We know there's a teacher recruitment crisis that is only I think probably will deepen even more, because it's not an easy environment to work in. It's very rewarding, but it's not easy. And I think the more that your business areas can support them, so whether it's HR and induction, finances in terms of looking after your money and making it count so that you don't have to go through redundancy processes. You do have a bit of spare money in the pot to pay for training and development, or, just little things like staff wellbeing. Can we do something on a Friday afternoon to make them feel valued? It's not just the pay, it's actually how can we do small things to make them feel valued? Limiting your risk. Nobody wants to talk about risk registers and risk assessments, but actually a school is no different. In fact, it's probably even more important, because you can sometimes have 1,300 young people in that school. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's so important. And if you've got all of those things right and working together, then it frees up the specialists, the practitioners in the classroom, leadership to lead. It frees them up to do all of those things you need to be able to do to have those successful outcomes. And it's really interesting, because you said something just a little bit earlier that I wanted to pick up on. For me, the passion is about the complete child. So, there's much has been said about how schools measure and monitor and exams and qualifications. But a great school sees kind of like that holistic view. Yes, of course, if someone's incredibly academic, then you want to make sure that they follow the path that's right for them. But I've also realised through my work that, it's just as important you have that kind of all-round global citizen, that children that don't get a chance to have that cultural capital and those enrichment experiences, you're able to do that. And you can do that if you have a handle on what you're doing in those business areas. You can send a year 9 cohort of 100 kids to the Lake District for a week to do outward bound. And what they learn and what I saw, so I did that 3 times. I was fortunate enough or not fortunate by the time I got home and I was exhausted. But what I saw in terms of taking these groups of kids from inner London in a really deprived area to the Lake District, where they'd never been out of London, they'd never seen sheep. Some of them had never even been away from their parents, and you're getting them to throw themselves off a cliff, obviously risk assessment permitting. But and you know what? I pushed myself out my comfort zone, because I thought, how can I expect the team that I was working with to do this stuff if I wasn't prepared to show them that Miss was willing to do that as well? So that to me is almost, it works parallel with the teaching and learning and the qualifications and the outcomes. Every child is different, and every child should be given the opportunity to shine in whatever way they're able to.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess in a short way of describing it, you take the headache of all that business, administrative, all those systems and processes, freeing up those teachers to be able to do what they're supposed to be doing, which is teaching our children, and not worrying about the HR processes and the compliances and all of those things. And I guess that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking a headache out of everything, of course, but in a more boring but really practical and important sense, you're also keeping the reputation of that school. You're gaining momentum. You're keeping that reputation really positive, because especially in the state sector, schools have certain regulatory things they have to do. They have to stay compliant. They have to report to the ESFA. They have to, follow the Academy's financial handbook, all of those things. And they take time. And if you have a specialist that knows that handbook inside out, that knows what HR process is, that knows the risk attached to certain actions and can put that forward, to a head teacher, look, you've got processes, use them properly, and you won't find yourself in a tribunal. But you inevitably then won't find yourself paying thousands of pounds as an agreement because you haven't done something right. So take away the pain of wondering whether you're compliant, of wondering whether you're meeting those deadlines that are external deadlines. You can't wiggle around them. If you don't send your ESFA returns back, for instance, they'll put you on a list, a publicised list to say this school have failed to do 2 out of 5 of their returns. And, take away all of that pain and headache, but also have someone that completely understands or can at least put processes in so you don't fail to be compliant on any level that you have to.
Yes, that's a really, really key concept, isn't it? That you say that it's helping the teachers do what they're supposed to do, but also looking at this bigger picture of, the reputation of that particular school is because it's such a public thing, isn't it? As you say, if they're not compliant, what are people going to think about that school?
And compliance stops with the head teacher. There's a health and safety incident, it's the head teacher that's responsible. And not all head teachers realise, or recognise that on an operational basis. So make sure that the processes are in place, and no one's saying that they have to do them. They just have to be sure, and they just have to quality assure that those processes, those practicalities are in place, and that they feel comfortable and confident that they're in place. I think that's the kind of bigger picture stuff.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What does Eximia Eximia stand for? What does it actually mean?
So it's interesting you asked that. It does mean something. It means exceptional, so that it's Latin translation for exceptional. And for me, everything that we would want to deliver, or I would want to deliver, has to be exceptional, because I absolutely understand how tight budgets for schools can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're investing in a service, you're investing in us, you're investing in Eximia, but by the very token, you want to get value from whatever we're doing. So for me, the value will either come in terms of savings, it will come in terms of staffing, as in if you can streamline your processes, you should make those savings quite naturally. But ultimately, it comes from that kind of exceptional service and actually the exceptional expertise that you're kind of buying into if you come to Eximia.
Like it. I like the idea of that. And so how do you work with these schools then? I mean, is it just schools that you work with, or other types of institutions or organizations? How does one work with you?
So we can work with any organisations, because any organisation has a need for strengthening their business services, strengthening their processes, making them more robust, limiting that risk. We can do that for practically any organisation. But obviously for us, the passion and the kind of expertise specifically is in education. And for me, having talked to lots of schools, there is a need, and the need is becoming ever more present, or maybe highlighted as a result of COVID. There seems to be a real, like a real call out actually. So for us, yes, our focus is very much on education. And in terms of how we work with them or how they approach us, we will obviously speak to them, find out what the needs are, what solutions they may need. It could be a particular area, so they might come and say, can you do an audit on our HR department, or can you sit with us for 2 hours and we'll go through the budget and you can have a look and see where you think savings could be made. Sometimes they might come to us and say, we have a grievance, it's not going particularly well, can you review all of the paperwork and kind of do an independent report on where we are? So I guess it's different strands. So it could be making improvements, it could be auditing and then suggesting what the improvements are, or it could just be that independent eye. So that could be, in terms of an investigation, in terms of risk assessment, just someone from outside the school, but with that knowledge and expertise to say, actually, you need to think about doing it this way, or have you thought about doing it this way? Or actually, we're in a bit of a pickle, like you're in a bit of a pickle, and we need to unpick it and try and get to the bottom of what needs to be done in order to move forward.
Yeah. So I guess in a way, it's a combination of incident management and problem management and sort of consultancy and support as well. So you support your clients as well as give them advice or help them repair some damage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it would be lovely if we were proactive more than reactive, but often
Sure.
sometimes people are coming to us because they have a specific issue or problem.
Yeah.
And in which case, you're almost being reactive to the fact that you might be halfway down the path, so to speak. But it would be lovely if it was more proactive. So we do organise training sessions on a range of different areas. And obviously, the idea being that if you can recognise there's a need for that training, then hopefully you wouldn't need to become so reactive. So we run investigations training. So if we run that and train, say, a circle of middle leaders even, and say, look, this is what you're looking, and it could be investigations training in regards to behaviour. So obviously, if they've then got that training and they conduct their own investigations, in particular to a behaviour incident, then the idea is that it doesn't become an issue further down the line because they've already almost done things properly, and in terms of compliance, they're on the point that it then doesn't become an issue with, an external agency saying, hold on a minute, you haven't done this right, or Ofsted coming in saying we want to do a no notice inspection because we've had someone flag up a safeguarding issue. So it's, in a way, it's great to be proactive, but often people come to us when it's at the reactive stage. But my concept is that what I'd really like to do is try and resolve that issue for that particular time, and then have those conversations and work with them to improve things so they don't find themselves back there in 6 months' time. And actually, when I leave them, they've got the capacity to do things on their own moving forward.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've had some experience in the public sector, and I want to know, well, from your perspective, if it's the same problem, which is that quite often mistakes will happen, but nothing's ever done, nothing ever progresses beyond it, and they just deal with it the same way. Is that fair to say that you find the similar kind of problems?
Do you know, if I had £1 every time I go, particularly into schools, now I'm not trying to make a generalisation at all, but sometimes when you go in and you're trying to resolve an issue with them, you'll talk to the people that are leading that particular area, or they're managing the situation, and it'd be like, oh, we've always done it this way. And, the world has changed significantly, even in 15 years that I've been in education. But education itself changes at least every other month. It's shifting sands, and compliance changes and government changes, and education is sometimes a really powerful tool for government to be, shall I say, fiddling with. It's something that becomes on their agenda that could be left for that particular moment in time because something else, sometimes I think change happens for change's sake with education, and it's not always as a result of consultation with leaders. So actually it's not being done talking to the people that are working on the shop floor on that day-to-day operational level with these young people, and with all of the responsibilities and kind of force fields that push against them. Because you go into a school and 99% of the staff are like, we're here for the kids. That's what matters to us. We don't want to fill in papers. We don't want to report, but they have to.
And I guess from their perspective, and this is no disservice to anybody working in those areas, but it's because you're there or they're there for a purpose. That's why some of those things don't necessarily get fixed, because they're concentrating on that, whereas these systems and processes aren't strong enough to actually support them, but then they don't fix them, and then you're in this kind of constant cycle. I'm guessing and I guess that again, that's back to the main point of what you do.
Yeah, I think there's several things. And again, it's not generalizations. I'm just talking from experience. The academy conversion, the kind of, regulations that got changed in terms of moving as many schools as possible to the academy agenda.
Yeah.
It meant that there was lots of academies that became academies very quickly, and trusts that became bigger incredibly quickly. And it was almost like, how do we keep pace with that change? How do we make sure that we've got all of that solid foundation in place, all of that solid expertise that we need, because we're not just one school now. We could be an academy trust of 30 schools. So, and it happens so quickly. So it's kind of like, did they keep pace? And I guess, did they recognize quickly enough that there was that real need for that expertise in the different areas? Because that, once you become a trust, schools are businesses anyway, but even more so when you become a trust that's not just responsible for one school, you could be responsible for between one and I think the biggest trust is something like 50 odd schools. Wow. So it's that recognition. And at the time, the local authorities, for the most part, they were losing an income stream. So they went, you're an academy now, hands up, you're on your own. I remember them doing that to us when, and I was told you need to work in HR because they didn't have a HR specialist. They'd always had HR support from the local authorities. So my route into kind of business areas from school really came about because there was a need, and the need was given to you with 2 or 3 days notice. Wow. You're on your own. I'm not saying that's the same for all local authorities, but it seemed to be very much the case. And why not? Because you weren't paying into those local authorities.
I guess it's not from a negative perspective, but they're effectively, well, we're not getting the income, so we can't support that. So we have to support other things. So,
and then they did their service level agreements. So you could buy into them, but there wasn't a huge amount, there wasn't a huge amount of competition. And, again, it's almost that it's done the same way that it's always been done. Yeah. And things have changed significantly. And the needs of schools when they converted to academies changed significantly. So I think people really need to recognise that change and that pace of change.
I can see why a lot of schools have struggled or are struggling with so many different factors that are affecting it. And when they haven't got a robust enough internal system or the processes and the support in place, then that's why they do struggle, isn't it?
Definitely. And you know what, schools are filled with great staff.
Oh yeah.
They're absolutely, to me, they're just amazing. When I see them with the children and when I talk to them about, just the improvements they've helped make, even if it's just in confidence. Like, I remember a couple of times I was a mentor to a couple of year 11s. And, one of them came back to get her results and she was just like, I want to give you a hug. Like, but you can't give me a hug. They've got, you can't give me a hug. I take on board the fact that you're really happy. But just to know, and I only had a small part. I knew that I was making a difference with what I was doing in the business. But in terms of face-to-face with the kids, when I think back to sort of stories or when I've given up my time for them, and then they, you can just see the difference it's made, even if it's just in terms of confidence. I know how to write that letter now. I know how to construct a revision plan. I know how to climb a mountain.
I can relate to that one, definitely. You say you've only been, the business itself has been sort of September. Was that, am I correct in saying that, from last year?
September it launched.
What's that journey been like? It's been a crazy time. Obviously we can talk about COVID, but what has been that journey been for you? And where are you now? Where's the business now?
Oh, I think through a combination of sheer grit and determination, actually. I made my decision after Christmas that I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I gave the school that I was working in, I said I would work until the end of the academic year. That was really important to me. And they were, obviously over them. Well, they were very excited for me to be starting my business, but they were very kind of, we don't want to lose you. And that's lovely. But they understood, they totally understood. So I think from January to August, I did a huge amount of planning.
Mm.
I wrote my business plan. I tried to speak to people to make sure there was definite need out there, and just really continue to do my day job whilst pursuing the dream of starting the business. And then lockdown one happened, and I was asked probably about 3 times by people in my previous employ, where I was at the time, are you sure you want to do this? We can retract your resignation, which was lovely, but I thought there's never going to be a right time. And I have to believe in myself, and I have to believe in what I'm providing to schools. And I have to believe that, if never more so than whatever that new normal is going to be, I'm going to be needed. So I held on to that. I held on to my passion and my vision. And then when September came, it was just a case of all systems go, and just talk to people, let them know who I am, what the plan is, how we can support them, and then just kept going. It's not been easy, and I suspect it's not easy for anybody, apart from maybe pharmaceuticals and but even then it's still not easy because it's affected everyone on some level.
Yeah.
But you just have to keep believing, I guess. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but I think it's never, it's so true. You just have to keep telling yourself that your vision is there, your passion hasn't changed, and the need is there. And if I didn't think that, I wouldn't be doing it. I could have easily have gone and got a new role in a different school, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted, if I can help 10 schools rather than just one school, and more than 10 schools, that's what it's about to me.
That's amazing. I love that. And the only reason something is cliche is because it's true. And,
Mm,
and I think that's why we're here. It's why I do these little podcasts. It's because it's sharing that purpose driven attitude towards it. You've focused on this vision of what you want to do. You want to help these people in education. Ultimately, you want to change the lives of those children that you're supporting, or giving those schools the ability to support
mm.
better. I mean, that's just a phenomenal thing. It's a very short space of time to and going through COVID as well. I mean, what else have you been, have you had to do? Have you got a website? Have you got, what's the situation right now?
I've been really lucky. I've been doing some work overseas as well as in the UK.
Wow.
And I finally launched the website, and I'm so excited because for me, I had again, I kind of knew in my head what I wanted it to look like and what I wanted it to say to my audience. And it's just that and more. For me, I couldn't have pictured it any more than what it's more than what I anticipated. So yeah, I'm very excited. And I've had, even like just a couple of comments, even though it's only been live for the last couple of days, and someone just wrote and just said the website's brilliant and the passion comes through. And I thought that's exactly what I wanted to do. Ultimately I want people to come and talk to us, but I need to make sure that they understand what we're about,
Yeah.
and understand what they're going to get if they choose to secure us to do work for them.
Mm. Fantastic. Who made your website?
Well, Tony from Designs Digital made my website, and you, Graham Baker, did my photos.
Did you see
So
what I did there? Did you see what I was doing there?
no, I was going to say, because again, actually, it's really interesting because I've always believed in small businesses anyway. because it's important. But I think since I've become a small business, if I can like support other small businesses because I need them, because there's something that I can ask them to do for me, but that's business for them. And then when they do a phenomenal job, which you both have, I can then feel so secure in saying, the people that did my website, and the photos are amazing, that other people will then find out about you.
Well, thank you. But it's also more importantly for you that they find you, and when they come to you, as you just said, they can see your story. They can know. It's about showing what I try and help people with is that showing your story so that people connect to you, because then people want to work with you because they see, crikey, Penny knows what she's talking about. She's got experience. And the drive is there. The fact that you've started a business during COVID, left a job and started a business during a time when people were running for the hills, that's something to be really be proud of, and something to respect from another perspective, from another business perspective. So yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I get a lot of my talking about small businesses. I mean, I use networking a lot. Do you do the same? And obviously that's how we did meet, through a networking group. Is there specific networking groups for teachers, or are you just finding that working with businesses helps that kind of process?
I mean, obviously I do networking, and I'm part of the ABC network, which is fantastic, not least for support, but just to have that, to also, interestingly enough, have that structure. So because I get up, and I know that I have meetings that early in the morning, they set me up for the day, but I can meet like-minded people and support them as well as them supporting me. So even if you can't necessarily make those connections, you know that you've got that kind of almost emotional support as well as that, work support. So that's kind of been really useful for me, because there are times when it feels completely overwhelming. And if anyone says it doesn't, they're not being truthful, because it can be, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. But if you've got a group or individuals that you can turn to and say, do you know what, I've had a really difficult day today, and they're there at the right time, they can, it's normal. It's absolutely normal. That is invaluable. But in terms of networking directly with the audience, obviously, normally in a kind of academic calendar, there will be several events that you can go to, and I would have gone to anyway as part of my role as senior leader, but they're not happening at the moment. No. So those kind of relationships and connections are even more important, because people, those head teachers and CEOs and governors, they need to trust me, because I'm going to be doing work on effectively what is their baby. That's how we look at it as a school. A school is a family, and so they need to trust me. So that's really key to me, that they can trust me and that they completely understand that if I'm doing work for that school is just as important to me as the one that I spent 6 years at. There isn't huge amount. There's no difference to me.
That's a great work ethic. It's almost, they're not bringing you into work on their business as such. You're working with them. You're almost coming in like a partnership. I suppose that's one way of the way I'm seeing it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's exactly how I'd like to work. And it might be that I have to have challenging conversations or difficult conversations if something's not right, but that's why they brought me in sometimes, and that will always be delivered with the best possible interest of the school and the children at the core. So if I have to have those conversations, I will, because that's, in my logo, as you said right at the beginning, it's all about honesty and integrity and being responsive. So yeah, there is definitely that collaboration and that supportive relationship, rather than I'm going to come in, do my job and go. There will always be an element of support. How can I help you to make sure that you're kind of able to either learn from this or move forward quicker, but then you can do the rest yourself.
Correct me if I'm right. So you have different ways of working. So it could be that you just go in and solve one problem, and then you obviously give advice, but you also have like a continued support program. Is that how it works?
Yes, there's different ways. We've got a kind of retainer scheme as well. So
Gotcha.
there's 5 different tiers, which will mean that whichever tier you decide to work with us on would depend how many days, physical days support you would get and how many hours of telephone support you would get. So there are ways, it's flexible. There are
Mm.
ways for a school to work with us just on a kind of, we've got an investigation that needs doing, or actually, no, we want this kind of annual support. And this is the tier that would work best for us in terms of how much we think we will need to use you, and how much, so that they know exactly what is their cost each month.
Excellent. So it's very flexible to their needs as opposed to, no, this is how I work and you've got to fit. It's about you fitting with them more than
Mm.
anything else. We know what you've been through, where you've come in terms of your business and what you're doing right now. Obviously, we're in a difficult sort of time. What's the future hold for you? Where do you see your business going? What do you see it growing over the next few years?
My aim is to definitely have a business model that's growing.
Mhm.
And ideally, what I want is to have a specialist team that can deal with the different business areas. So there'll be a bespoke finance team, a bespoke HR, risk management, health and safety. That's the ideal. And because I do genuinely believe there's a need, and I do think that to have those specific teams will be far more useful to the school. However, at the moment, it is very much about just making sure we get that support out there. So, effectively, what I'm trying to say in a very long winded way is that we will grow at the pace that is right for us and at the pace that is right for the customers.
Yeah.
Because if we grow too quickly and we don't keep pace with that growth, I don't want the customer service or that kind of whole vision of this exceptional to be changed.
Yeah.
Because schools need, if they need that advice, if they need that guidance, they inevitably need it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
They don't want to wait for a week because Eximia they haven't got the capacity to deal with things as quickly as they have previously. It's busy. Schools are a hugely
Mm.
busy environment, and if they need a piece of advice about HR, they can't afford to wait for a week.
Mhm.
There are kind of like almost service level agreements, and I don't want to get to a point where what we're providing them is not what our kind of ethos is.
I mean, we have already touched on the sort of state of the education as an industry, but what are the sort of right now? What are the main problems that you see when you work with some of these organisations? Is there a common problem, or is it just so varied that it could mean anything? But is there anything common that you see cropping up time and time again?
There are 2 areas. One is the finances,
Mhm.
because funding is being squeezed. Now, interestingly, state schools didn't have any of their funding cut through COVID, but they obviously had additional costs. And I know that the
Yeah.
government said they were going to reimburse some of the costs, but only if the school was in a particular position with their budgets. That doesn't go out to all schools. So finance is often a big thing. How can you support them to either have more money so that can be ploughed into those students, or at least come out of that deficit position? So that's one of the things that I see a lot.
Yeah.
And secondly, unfortunately, often lots of HR issues,
Mm.
because we're working in an environment which is incredibly fast paced. The workload can be ridiculously heavy, and people are having to deal with a whole realm of issues that they've never had to deal with before. you know, monitoring kids wearing masks, monitoring social distancing, keeping yourself safe as well as the 20 to 30 children you've got in a classroom, and well-being. You know, how important it is to really think about the well-being of your staff body, because great people are gonna help achieve great outcomes for those young people. And, you know, sometimes not enough time is given to those HR practices and, you know, that staff well-being. And it's great to have it written down on a policy or pieces of paper, but unless you've got people implementing that, or that is part of the culture of that organization, the policy or the piece of paper is not going to make a massive difference. So there, you know, like I see lots and lots of kind of HR issues, most of which could have potentially been avoided.
That goes back to that point that you made earlier about being being proactive versus being reactive. I guess it's times like this that, yes, you can go in and react to whatever situation that school needs help with, but at the same time, it's going to be better to go in proactively to put in those things to prevent these issues from, as you said earlier, not the exact words, but going past the point of no return, which is going to
Yeah,
be costly in the long run, isn't it?
huge costs, and not just financially, just even, you know, on a staff basis.
Yeah,
You know, there is a grievance process in every organisation,
sure.
but if a grievance is taken out on you as an individual, that really can be really painful. So we're not just talking about the cost in terms of that, the monetary cost. There is a cost in terms of how that impacts all the people involved in that process. And then, as a kind of indirect result, how that gets disseminated to the rest of your staff body. You need to avoid that, almost that position that you might get into of that toxic environment. You have to have that open culture where there's transparency. You know, if someone wants to leave, have a culture that encourages that person to come and speak to you and say, I'm going to be leaving. It's my own reason, you know, I'm going to go to a different job, or I'm coming out of teaching, or whatever the reason is, but foster that culture. Because then what that does is that allows you to plan as a school. You can run your adverts. I know this sounds quite, you know, blunt, but you can run your adverts earlier. You've got that opportunity. So you can still look after the person that's decided they're going to leave. But just having that transparency means that you can plan better. You can have, when you have to have a difficult conversation, it's a tiny bit easier because you've already made that culture of transparency.
Yeah, that's really important. You said that the words that you use, the toxic environment. Having been in some myself, I get it. I understand that whole. There's no support, or you feel that there's no support, even though there might be on paper, as you said. There's you know, long as these things are documented, but if it's not being implemented, or it's not being tracked, or it's not being proactive about, then it's next to worthless, isn't it? And people will leave then, which again is going to cause more problems for those kids in the long run, because you get good people are going to leave, walk away from a great job.
And it's always better to make a decision than not to make one at all.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's wrong or right, to do nothing is just the worst decision you can make.
Yeah.
Because if it's worth someone talking about, it's worth listening. Even if you then have to have that conversation, we don't have the funding. We don't have the funding to run with that activity. Let's find a way. Let's go and investigate different pots of funding. Be honest, but at least you've listened. At least you're giving the staff a voice, and, you know, they can say, okay, well, didn't work this time, but we're just going to park that. Or, you know, if they come to you as line management and say, look, we've got this issue, this isn't working well, or I've got a really difficult relationship with another member of staff, don't sweep it. I guess what I'm saying is, don't sweep it under the carpet, because in my experience, it will always come back and haunt you. whether it's in 2 months or a year, it will come back. So it's just, it is about being proactive. It is about making decisions, and it's about having those really great systems in place that are being used properly and effectively, but with kindness and empathy. But obviously still having those difficult conversations when you need to have them.
And having the processes in place to support those conversations as well.
Definitely.
Because people like that confidence. If they've got the confidence that they know what they're doing in a situation, or we've come across this, we need to have these conversations, but you've got that support mechanism to support you, it becomes a hell of a lot easier.
And consistency. If you've got processes, and as a line manager, if you're ever unsure, you can refer back to the process. You can refer back to what's in place. Often when someone comes to me for advice or guidance, the first thing I'll say is, where's your such and such policy? Where's your absence management policy? Where's your finance policy? Because that's the first thing I want to see is, what have you written down and committed to? And then I can work backwards and see if you've actually done what you say you were supposed to do in your policy.
Do you think that some people are scared by that they're actually going to realise that they haven't been doing it right, if that makes sense?
Potentially, and I guess that goes back to what I said to you about having to have challenging conversations with a small c sometimes. But I would always rather be honest, and that's the professionalism. If you're going to ask Eximia to do a piece of work, I always want you to get the big picture and the honest picture. So if I go in there and I think actually there's a risk attached to what you've done, I'll be completely honest with you about that risk. If there's a solution to mitigate the risk, I'll also give you the solution. But ultimately, and people don't always follow policy, and it's not done because they're being difficult or because they've meant to not follow it. But you just have to be honest, and sometimes that's all you need to do actually, is hold your hands up and say, we're so sorry, we missed a step out, or, your response should be, we haven't followed our own internal processes. However, we reviewed this. Sometimes just holding your hand up can make the difference between nipping that situation in the bud or allowing it to become a situation further down the line.
So we've talked about where you've been, what you're doing today, and the future plans. What advice would you give just say that a head teacher or somebody that you want, would likely to benefit from you? What would your top tips be right now? What do they need to be thinking about for next year?
I'd say, first of all, take the temperature, and I mean metaphorically, not physically, of your staff body. Try and I don't mean by doing staff evaluations, I mean really try and understand, and probably via your SLT actually, what's going right for the staff, what's not going so right, and build that into your planning, either for now or for your planning moving forwards, because we're halfway through the academic year. No, maybe not halfway. It feels like halfway. But we're probably a third of the way through. But then we've got the Christmas break, and coming back after Christmas, there may well be more rules and regulations, or things may have calmed a little. But that's my first tip, is really, however hard it is, try and take that kind of temperature of what's going on in the staff body, because that can just give you so much indication about what you may or may not be needing to adjust in terms of approach, in terms of communication. Because often we think that they know what we're thinking, and communication kind of gets parked by the wayside. But actually, I'd always rather tell somebody something twice than forget to tell them at all. So that's my second tip, communication. If you can't meet up for all staff briefings because of social distancing, find a way. Do you do staff briefings by Zoom? Keep in touch and make sure that the staff, and this is for any organisation as well actually, get communicated with. We're just living in such a rapid period of change that if you forget to communicate small things, you're almost sometimes manifesting that lack of feeling valued or that lack of feeling part of a team. You know, all the fake news that goes around. Some people can't differentiate between what's right and what isn't right because they're just being bombarded with different messages. So make sure that communication is key and it's regular and it's to the point of the things that you really need to communicate. And then hopefully the white noise will go away. And then just, I think, particularly in regards to a school, make sure that you do review your process and policies. Are they still fit for purpose? Are they compliant? Have they taken on board all of the new guidance that's been issued? And I guess if you do go through a process, such as a grievance or a disciplinary, be prepared to review the policy after the event. You can't do it while you're in it because the policy that was in place is the policy that you follow. But learn lessons from those processes. Don't kind of feel defensive but I didn't do anything wrong and we haven't. Try and learn lessons and say, okay, so this was fine, but this wasn't right. So what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Mm.
I guess just hit things as far as possible and as practically as possible, hit things head on rather than thinking we'll deal with that later.
That's great. And as you said, that's great advice for anybody in
Mm,
any situation. The point about that last point about, I'll say they're learning from mistakes, but it's that principle of, you know, we've done it this way. What can we do to improve it, or how can we prevent that negative thing from happening again? And
mm.
implementing it, not just saying, "Oh yeah, what can we do?" and then moving on. It's saying, "What can we do?" and implementing it so that it creates that new cycle. And I'm very much on board with that.
And just, yeah, it's not necessarily learning from mistakes, it's just learning lessons.
Yeah.
Because if you, especially when you're dealing with human beings, you can't make assumptions, you can't second guess how they're feeling, how they're perceiving they've been treated or how they feel. So actually you kind of almost need to use any of your people processes as a kind of learning experience.
Mm.
Like, okay, what can we learn about this in the future? You know, do we need to communicate better? Do we need to make sure that line management's done regularly and a document kept between the two people to just so that's the open avenue of communication and that person feels that they're valued because they have that time with their line manager? It's so scary how much line management doesn't take place because everything's just so busy.
It feeds itself then, doesn't it? Because the more busy they are, the less communication that happens. So you feel undervalued. Therefore, it makes things busier because and all these problems that we've talked about already, the HR issues, the people issues, never get resolved. Um, yeah, I mean, for me, what you're doing is an amazing service, and so many businesses and obviously schools can benefit from it. So how is the best way? Obviously, we've talked about your new website, but how is the best way to get in contact with you? How do we work with you?
Pick up the phone, email, and I think at the moment I'm very fortunate that I can work virtually, so either via Zoom or phone. Ideally, I prefer to go into a school, particularly if it's something they're not quite sure, something doesn't quite feel right. It's
Mhm.
much better to go into a school and just feel the culture and the values and you know how the kids are feeling when they're walking around the corridors and stuff. And that's not always possible at the moment,
No.
completely understandably so. But you know, we can still work virtually. We can have those conversations. We can ask questions that we know should help us get to the root of what's going on. Yeah, so it's just email, pick up the phone. Happy to arrange Zoom meetings so that you almost feel that you're sitting in a room together, even if you're not. Because
It's best
that's
we
really
can.
important. They
Yeah.
have to know that they can trust me and that my response will be honest and effective in terms of how do we move things forward for you.
Well, all I can say is I hope they see this, because if they can see this and they can see that your drive comes out, it really does. You know, it's very clear to me that you feel very strongly about this. The fact that you, and I can't re-emphasize this enough, which is the fact that you've started this in the middle of lockdown, or the first lockdown, and built this up over time to where you are now. You've got a website. You're already doing this for other schools and helping people. That's something to be really proud of yourself. I think it's really important to say.
Oh, thank you. I am really proud, and I feel really fortunate that I am able to help schools, and I don't want that to stop. I don't want to stop using, like, I don't want to stop using everything I've learned and try to help others. So even, I've been thinking about how, because I'm passionate still about kids. So even with other companies that I'm speaking to that do real amazing work with some of these young people, and I'm like, how can I have the synergies with them? How can I work with them in terms of my links and my experience in schools? So I've got that going through my head as well. So I must work on that as well.
It sounds like you've got a lot going on, and you've really got a clear idea of where you're going with it. And for that, I'm all, I can't think of the word, not grateful, but I'm admiring it. I admire that so much. I think it's just really, really good of what you're doing. It's just fascinating stuff. I think before we sort of wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say? Is anybody out there, that any mentors or people that have helped you on your journey you'd like to say thanks to? Anything at all? Any final words of wisdom?
There's so many people I could thank. Honestly, there's probably a list. I have been really fortunate to, especially my last head teacher was just so amazing at letting me run with, basically delegated responsibility for the business areas, but held me to account. I learned such a lot, and was really fortunate that she gave me that role. She gave me that responsibility, but also, I guess, had the confidence in me. It's like, you can do this. You're absolutely amazing. And she still does that now. And, we've talked about networking. I'm so grateful to everybody, especially at ABC, but there are some other, I'm so grateful that they're at the end of a phone. I can have those 2 meetings a week, just the support, because I think for small businesses and directors of small businesses now more than ever, you just need someone that you can pick up the phone and say, is this normal? But yeah, there's so many people, Graham, because at the end of the day, people have to have confidence in me to allow me to shine. I know what I believe in, and I know what I can achieve and what I can do. But I have to have other people that also believe in me, so they're willing to go to key connections and say, do you know what, I've met Penny, she's amazing, she'd be brilliant. So there's all sorts of people that I could thank, but I'm very scared I'm going to leave someone out. But they know, I've got some great champions. I've got some great champions who are just completely astounded by what I want to achieve, and they're totally behind me, even if they think I'm crackers and, why are you not taking it a bit easier? But I don't want to. There's a job to be done. And, like I said at the start, if I can help 10 schools in the next 6 months and 20 by the end of the year, then that's amazing.
I think that's some great words to finish on. I think I'm behind you. I think, I've met you a couple of times, and we've done the photo shoot, and I've seen your passion come through and the drive. And I think it's really important. And you say the networking has been fantastic, the support that you get. I think it's clear to say that everyone is behind you. And I think if anybody who watches this or listens to this on the podcast shares this with people in education, just so that people can realize there is help out there when they might be struggling and not thinking outside of the box, to get in contact with you. I'll put all your contact details on the video and on the show notes for the podcast. And let's spread the word, so to speak. So thanks again, Penny. It's been absolutely brilliant. How have you found it?
Yeah, it's great. It's always good to talk to you, but it's just it's I don't know. I want to inspire, but I also understand that I've been inspired by people.
Mm.
And like I've been inspired, let's take it back to the young people. I've been inspired by so many who, to be quite honest with you, have had really, really tough time. Like nothing. I say to my kids, you are blessed. You are blessed and you are privileged in terms of you've got a great education. I'm supportive of that education. So I say that to them all the time because they don't actually completely understand some of the life stories that I've met from kids that are like 13 or 14 or maybe a bit older. And that I think that's what I have to keep thinking about. They inspire me to want to make that difference.
I'm not even going to say anything more to that. I think that's perfect. A perfect ending to our conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here, Penny. It's been really fascinating learning about what you can do for businesses. And as I said, anybody listening or watching this, please share it with people in the education business. I think it's really important. I think the work that Penny does can really help and make a difference to those kids. And I think that's the bottom line of what this is all about. So yeah, thanks again, Penny. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.